with that? No issues? You like the format? Need me to change it? Yes.
Was that due already?
Yeah, but it's still open.
Okay.
So if you haven't got it in, try to get it in as soon as possible. I didn't put a due date on it. Is there anybody that needs to do their work breakdown structure? Anyone who's not come up here to talk? Okay. All right, moving along, we're in chapter 7, project management, which is the big one, kind of what we've been working on with our companies that we're creating. We're gonna look at what project management is, the scope of it, what do we use it for, and how should we think about managing a project. All right, so let's try to get the theoretical idea of what project management is. You all are here as business students, so obviously you want to either work for a company or you want to start your own, right? In essence, you will be working on projects or you're actively working on a project if you are trying to create your business at the beginning. So we say, hey, a project is anything, right? Anything that has a beginning and end. Right, and it has some sort of good outcome. It could be an initiative, it could be a product, it could be a company, it could just be working in teams. But in essence, if you, for example, your companies, every sort of major milestone that you're trying to achieve will involve managing some sort of project, right? The main ideas or themes of something. So what are we going to learn here? Major activities associated with defining and organizing the project, describe the procedure for constructing a project network. So with your companies that you are working on, you could say either I will do all of the work myself, and then we say, hey, that's a very, very inefficient way to manage that project. Or you say, hey, this project needs to be segmented into various activities and various procedures so that things work effectively and efficiently and keep down costs. So we want to also look at how we develop the schedule of a project, right? Creating timelines for when activities should be completed, when they should begin, and analyze the cost-time trade-offs in a projected network. Right? So in a project, you say, hey, I make decisions. I'm making decisions for my company. Well, what are the alternatives to the final decision that you make? Right? What's the trade-off for something that you did not do, that you did not decide on, that you did not make a choice on? And then you want to assess the risk of missing the project deadline. So we want to try to understand the cost of not meeting the expectations or the deadlines within our projects. How is that going to affect our bottom line? And identify the options available to monitor and control the projects. Right? In essence, college is a project for you right now. So you're at Concordia because this is a major project with the anticipation that you'll have a decent outcome from this. So we say cost benefit. Well, what's the cost? Right? We say the cost is the tuition. Tuition, the books, the housing, all of the above, right? What's the benefit? Learning, maybe the expectation or anticipation that you'll make X amount of dollars in 5 years, 10 years, what have you. But how do you expect to actually get there to meet that expectation? How are you monitoring your activities and controlling school itself? So we say, hey, what is a project? Interrelated set of activities with a definite starting and ending point, right? Which results in a unique outcome for a specific allocation of resources. So with your business, you say, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to begin starting this idea at this time with the outcome of the business will be operating. You say maybe that's your initial project, to create an operating business. Not one that's making a profit, right? Not one that's successful, not one that's anything of the sort, but just say, I want a business that has operations, right? A beginning and an end point. You say, I will allocate resources, people, money, right? All sorts of things, inventory to achieve that. All right, so what's project management? Right, project management is systemic, right? It has a system. It's doing things in phases, right? Working in phases. It's dissecting your project, right? Putting things, slicing the pie, right? Defining things. What exactly are we discussing with our project? What are the items, right? What are the people involved? Right, the entities involved, right? Organizing things, placing things in proper categories. Planning, poor planning leads to poor results, right? Good planning yields good results. Monitoring, do you have a system where things are monitored? Who's reviewing that every day, every week, every month? Who is monitoring the activities? You have camera systems to monitor the activities of the workers. You have database systems to monitor the cost of things and inventories. And controlling the projects, delegating tasks in a systemic way so that there are leaders and followers and assigned activities for each. All right, so what's a project management program? An interdependent set of projects that have a common strategic purpose. So you say, hey, we're running a program for pre-workout formula, right? At the beginning of the year for Q1, we're running a program. It could be a marketing program on a new product, right? All right, so you want to define the scope and objectives of the project. So you say, well, you know what, the barbershop is small. The scope of my barbershop will be small. The scope is small, right? The question would be, why is it small, right? Why are the operations going to be small? Why not large? But, well, you know what? This business is risky. You don't see a barbershop on every corner, right? Thus, if you don't see it all over the place, you know that it's one that's kind of risky. They come and they go because it's a difficult business to run. Thus, we want to start small, right? We want to have objectives of the project. What is your objective? To create small operations in an urban environment with X amount of people involved to gather X amount of demand. All right, selecting the project manager and team. If you try to do the business by yourself, ultimately you're not doing yourself any favors, right? Doing it yourself is a horrible process, right? If we say, hey, what is the process? Doing it yourself requires a lot of time, energy, effort, and there's only one set of eyes on it. So we say, as a process, you have a very simple process with one person overlooking all these different activities. And so you have to stop and think. You say, well, if I spread and delegate different tasks to different people, how much can the scope or scale of the business expand? Right? Because the goal of the business is to make as much money possible. So we do want to have people that are managers, that are leaders. We do want to effectively create teams, right? Teams are better than individuals. Right? It creates for a much broader process, more sets of eyes looking at faulty thinking, bad choices, bad decision making, things we may have overlooked. Right? The group is always more powerful than the individual, always. Thus, you should probably have a group, right, for the business. Recognizing the organizational structure. what is going to be the structure of the business? Who is the CEO, who's the VP, who's in accounting, right? Not even just that, but what is the role of bringing inventory in, moving the goods from one place to another, sales teams, right? All sorts of things. What is the structure? And we looked at constructing project networks, right? We want to create networks to see how one things are related to the other and how one thing impacts the other, right? We'll look at these correlations between activities. And thus we started with your work breakdown structures. You showed how one thing is related to the next and why it's important for this to happen before this happens, right? So we created diagrams within those networks. All right, so with our WBS, that's just a statement of all work that has to be completed, right? A statement of all work that has to be completed. And you showed within your diagrams of the work that has to be completed with marketing, with other roles of inventory, products, things like that. Now we say an activity is the smallest unit of work effort consuming both time and resources that the project manager can schedule and control. We say everything needs to be controlled and everything needs to be scheduled within our project, right? And it goes with activities, right? We need to assign and delegate who's going to be working on an activity, when they're going to be working on it. In essence, what are the resources that will be given to that? All right, so here's a WBS for St. John's Hospital. All right, so we say, hey, we're trying to relocation of St. John's. Maybe St. John's get closed, right? And now we're trying to relocate it. Or maybe possibly we're opening up a satellite hospital of some sort. But let's, just for ideological sake, let's just say we're relocating it. All right, so we need to organize and organizing the site preparation over here at the beginning, and then we got physical facilities and infrastructure. So with organizing and preparing the site for relocation, we say, hey, first thing we need to do is select administrative staff. We need to know who are going to be there to operate this new location. Next would be we'll select the site and survey, right? Next we need to find out where are we going to be located using surveys and things of that nature. Medical equipment, prepare final construction plans, bring utilities to the site, interview applicants for nursing and support staff, right? So we say admin is probably even more important than support staff and nursing because admin is going to run the actual building. Right? And make sure that things operate precisely. On our left-hand side, for physical facilities and infrastructure, we got purchase and deliver equipment, right? We need to build the hospital next. Inside the hospital, we'll have information systems, right, to communicate all through the building. Beyond that, we'll need to install medical equipment for our doctors and nurses to use. And beyond that, we'll have trained nurses and support staff. All right, so you had your network diagrams with your WBSs. So that's a visual display designed to depict relationships between activities. We're looking at circles and arcs, or for your sake, you did them a little different, right? You did so just rectangular forms, right? For the most part. All right, so what's a precedent relationship? A relationship that determines the sequence of undertaking activities. Specify that one activity cannot start until a preceding activity has been completed. So we need to know, in essence, what is the sequence of events that need to take shape, right, as things move along. What can we not start until something else has began? And then we get estimating activity times, right? We get different methods. We got some statistical methods, we got some learning curve models, we got some managerial opinions, right? So we want to understand how long does something take to be done? How long does each activity within the project long does it take to spray a 8,000 square foot home, right? First activity. How long does it take for you to assess the home, right? Evaluate how long it will take. How long will it take for you to drive to a particular site, right? And what needs to happen before that? What needs to happen before you actually begin the work itself, right? And how do you sort of build those with statistical models? So beyond that, you're gathering data along the way, and now you're kind of figuring out, using algorithms and statistical methods, easier methods for the next time that you have work, right? You're sort of building some sort of network. All right, here's an example. Ms. Kramer, the project manager of St. John's Hospital project, divided the project into two major models. She assigned Mr. Stewart the overall responsibility for the organizing and site preparation module, and Ms. Walker the responsibility for the physical facilities and infrastructure module. Using the WBS shown, the project team developed the precedence relationships, activity time estimates, and activity responsibilities in the following table. Right? So we're looking at the activities here on the left-hand side. We're looking at immediate predecessors, activity times in weeks, and responsibilities. Right? So what it is, we're just designating responsibilities of different people within the project system, organizing them into organizing the site preparation areas or physical facilities, infrastructure. We got those two, and we're looking at when things can start, right? Based on some sort of we're using the alphabetical system here. And we're looking at the number of times and weeks that it would take for that activity to be completed, all the way ranging from 40 weeks of constructing a hospital, right? Got this person, Casey, working on that, all the way down to, say like 4 weeks of installing medical equipment for this. Right? So you just wanna have everything in the visual representation laid out so that everyone's activities are well known, how long will it take to complete the activity, and what needs to happen before the activity begins. All right, now you want to have a path, a sequence of activity between the project start and finish. All right, so you want to have some sort of direction and understanding of what is going to be required to finish the project from the beginning to end. All right, then we got critical path, a sequence of activities between the project start and finish that takes the longest time to complete. Like, what is the most critical thing in your project? What is the thing that's going to take the longest to complete? What is the thing that's going to take the longest to complete in your projects? What would be the critical path? What do you think is the one activity or activities that will take the longest time to complete for your project? Yes.
Maybe like finding the location and then like renovating, so like how I want to.
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
Yeah. Right. You say, hey, the most critical thing in this operation is my physical location and renovating it so that it has a certain aesthetic and is everywhere, every chair is positioned in a way that makes the most sense for people to walk in and out, to get things cleaned up, all the different barber stations. All right, so you say the critical path is really just a physical one, right? Which is setting up the area. What else? Who could think of the most critical path? Like what is, yes?
Making the product in such large amounts for one thing.
Yeah, you say, hey, if that fails, we in essence, our business is gonna suffer greatly, right? It's like, hey, we're producing things in bulk. So our critical path is bulk baking, right? Preparation and baking of bulk items so that things are already out there for customers to grab. If not, if we would be trying to bake individually on a per unit basis, that would take forever and we would not have a successful business. as opposed to bulk baking. Anyone else could think of something? What about for our spraying company?
I think the longest part would probably be figuring out how to make a profit, so like figuring out pricing and all that.
Yeah, you say pricing, you say, hey, I'm dealing at a variable sort of, business here. In essence that, hey, homes are different sizes, right? So scale and the operations, the work performed is gonna always be on a per unit basis. That requires a lot of time and work to try to figure out what am I going to charge for each sort of house. And even special things that could come up within those houses, different obstacles and all sorts of things. People's yards, what you can and can't do based on zoning, all sorts of things. All right, so we just got some designations here of things you could do to develop a schedule. So we say earliest start time, or what we'll classify as ES, the earliest finish time of the immediately preceding activity. So we're looking at earliest finish time, EF, and activity, earliest start time plus its estimated duration, right? So we say the time of earliest finish time plus equals earliest start time plus estimated duration. Latest finish time, the latest start time of the activity that immediately follows, right? So we're thinking about this, like when can something begin? When should it end? And when is the latest that it can end before really the whole system sort of fails, right? When is the latest that something in your operations can end? What's the earliest that something can begin, right? You wanna designate these activities and tasks so you can understand deadlines, right? So looking at deadlines. All right, latest start time. The latest finish time minus its estimated duration, right? So latest start time is equal latest finish minus duration time. It's the amount of time it takes to complete. All right, then we got activity slack, the maximum length of time that an activity can be delayed without delaying the entire project, right? So understanding how long can you go with delaying a specific activity within this project before you delay the entire project itself, okay? So we're given here sort of a clock or sort of a pie measurement. So we can say, hey, we give an activity a name, right? It can be bringing in the muffins for the bakery. All right, we'll give it activity name A. All right, what's the estimated time for preparing the muffins? We say, well, maybe 12 hours. So we just say 12 hours. Right? What's the earliest we could finish with the muffins? Right? Earliest we could probably finish is half the time. Right? But not, the earliest we finish would be 12, not half, sorry. The latest we could give it is 14 hours, right? And the latest start time is 2 hours after we were supposed to begin it. Earliest start time would be 0 when we actually begin it. So really we're giving ourselves some buffers here because we said the estimated time is 12 hours, earliest finish time is 12 hours, but the latest we could go without it affecting the entire bakery is 14 hours, right? Or 14 hours, like, hey, the muffins impacted the making of the donuts, right? Because those donuts need to start being baked, right, at a certain time. And if we don't at least get it to 14, now the donuts can't even get baked, right? If the donuts can't get baked on time, then the cinnamon rolls will be late too. Everything sort of fails past 14 hours. So skip that. All right, analyzing cost, time, trade-offs, all right? Businesses don't run perfectly. Remember, we saw Lean systems, we're constantly trying to improve the process. You're never gonna get perfect, alright? But, cause there are always going to be trade-offs, alright? One of the trade-offs is cost or time. Right? How do you analyze the relationship between cost and time trade-offs? One is project crashing, shortening or expediting some activities within a project to reduce overall project completion time, right, and total projected costs. So you say, hey, you could shorten the process, you can expedite it to make it go faster, right? So you could reduce the time. If you reduce the time, you could reduce the overall cost of the project. But if you reduce the overall cost, most likely you've also reduced your income that you expect, right? Say for your own projects. It's a trade-off. We're like, well, at least we got it complete. We got it complete, but we didn't get it complete to where we projected to make all the money that we wanted to make within our companies. We had different costs associated with our projects. Direct costs. Right? What is a direct cost for your projects? What are some direct costs? Yes.
Cost of ingredients to make the actual product.
Yeah, you say, hey, I need to, my products, my baked goods cost money, so it's directly, I have to purchase it from somewhere, all the materials to make the baked goods from somewhere. What are indirect costs? What could be some indirect costs for your projects? What are some indirect costs for you? What do you think? What do you think? What's some indirect costs for your, yes?
Like insurance on anything?
Yeah, you say, hey, you know what, indirectly, it's not going towards actually operating the business, but is a cost of doing the business itself. Alright, so it's a cost of doing the business, but it's not really directly related to my consumer, right? My insurance is not directly related to my consumer. If I make a mistake, maybe my insurance is spraying, has something to do with it, right? But if all goes well, I still gotta pay the insurance, right? Regardless of what happens. You can say, hey, even utilities could be indirect in some way, right? It's just a cost of doing business. What could be penalty costs? What could be some penalty costs for your business? Yes.
The cost of something going wrong, so in the case of the bakery, if something gets burnt.
Yeah, you say the cost that, hey, there can be an error in this process, right? The cost of going wrong. Penalty, someone doesn't show up to work, right? At the bakery, right? That's where you're gonna be penalized with the process. Some of our material get destroyed, get wasted, right? Will be penalized in some way. Something where something could go wrong. What else for your own businesses? How else could you be penalized? Experience some penalty costs with your own businesses. Think not acting fast enough, right? You say, hey, a penalty cost is just poor planning, not acting quick enough because you got competitors, somebody beat you to it, somebody got your customer, right? Now you're being penalized for it. Process. You're like, hey, we're being penalized because this process is not good. This isn't an efficient process, right? That's penalized. It'd be anything where the project or your business will suffer in some way because of something that happens along the way. All right, what we got? We got normal time is the time necessary to complete an activity under normal conditions. We say under normal conditions, right? Under normal conditions, I could give a haircut in 35 minutes. What would be an abnormal condition?
Like the time longer than.
Yeah, but what could be some conditions that would make it abnormal for you? Anyone else can think of something that will be abnormal conditions for your project, for your business?
For mine, I know a lot of problems that bakeries have is tripping breakers when too much stuff is running, so tripping a breaker, you need to go find and flip it, and handling just mechanical error.
Okay, so we say, hey, mechanical things create abnormal conditions. You bet weather can create abnormal conditions, yes.
Oh, okay, so like, well, now they're going to like the wireless, so like tools and stuff like that, so like the clippers or something dying.
Yeah, we say, hey, not having charged products, right, electric charge, right? Under normal conditions, you can evaluate how long something can take an activity. Right, and normal cost, the activity cost associated with normal time. What does it cost me to give this haircut? Think about that. What does it cost me to give this haircut in 35 minutes? What does it cost me? Right? I'm the manager of the project or the business. I'm the leader, I'm the owner. What does it cost me under normal circumstances, on average, to complete a haircut? Right? This amount of electricity, these other factors are considered there too. Then we get crash time, the shortest possible time to complete an activity, right? The shortest possible time, which means that, hey, Starbucks is experiencing abnormal conditions, it's rush hour, there's a flood of people coming in, so now we have to sort of do more work than we normally would do, right? And so what's the shortest amount of time with these amount of people working here that we could get someone's latte completed, right? What's that crash time for? Right, and then that crash cost is the activity cost associated with the shortest amount of time, right? Obviously, crash time, you can't have someone doing crash activities all the time. You can't have your Starbucks employees working that hard all day, they have fatigue, right? But there may be times where it is rush hour, and now the cost will go down, right? Because you've now kicked things into higher gear. For a certain period, right? Unsustainable maybe throughout the entire day, but you could calculate, hey, during rush hour, cost to crash per period, right? We're looking at crash cost minus normal cost, right? Divided by normal time minus crash time. And we can say, hey, what's the cost associated with rush hour production of coffee? Because maybe you say, now, how do we get closer to that? Like, wow, we are able to produce when there's a high demand around rush hour, we're able to produce the coffee this much faster, right? And at this cheaper price. How do we as businesses say, hey, this is a new sort of benchmark for us? How do we get that? We're like, well, it's unsustainable with the amount of people that you have. So what do you do? What do you do if you're Starbucks? Right, you think maybe I have people that come in, I have a group of people that come in extra during rush hour times, right? And I schedule to where I have more people at rush hour, less people during normal times. Right? So that effectively, we can maximize, that cost. All right, minimum cost schedule, right? You're trying to figure out how can you get to the minimum cost for your companies, for your project, right? How do you get to the minimum cost? Well, first thing, we want to determine the project's critical path, right? What is the most important part of the business, right? We want to find the activity or activities on the critical path with the lowest cost of crashing per week. We want to reduce the time for that activity until it cannot be further reduced, or another path becomes critical, right? So here we're just trying to reduce the critical path, right? Because it's the most important part of the business or the project, right? Constantly reducing it by sort of using that crashing method, right? Maybe adding more people to the critical path so you can reduce the cost to it, right? Adding more resources, more inventory, changing the process of the critical path, something. We say the increase in direct costs exceeds the indirect penalty cost savings that result from shortening the project. If more than one path is critical, the time for an activity on each path may be reduced simultaneously. Repeat this procedure until the increase in direct costs is larger than the savings generated by shortening the project, right? So we want to have the increase in direct costs larger than the savings generated by shortening the project. In determining the minimum cost schedule for St. John's Hospital project, what we looked at, I'll kind of skip through that because that's just kind of a little too much to keep up with. All right, next we want to have a risk management plan, and a plan that identifies the key risks to a project's success and prescribes ways to circumvent them, right? So you want to have a way to manage the risks that you're taking on for your projects, right? You want to analyze them in sort of risk management way and prescribe ways to circumvent the risk. How do you go about eliminating some of the risks? Well, some of the ways we could do a strategic fit. We could look at to say, hey, does our strategy for creating a process for a business, is it a good fit for the business itself? Are we being a little bit too loose, a little bit too creative with this process, right? Does it have a good fit? So think of with the barbershop, right? The best way would actually be to look at other barbershops and see what's been the standard of operating, right? Because if you get maybe a little bit too creative, like that creativity costs a lot of money. And I don't know that necessarily translates into making a profit in any way, right? So maybe over-designing the layout may not be a strategic fit for the business that you're doing, having too much equipment. It costs you a lot of money, but it doesn't really yield any sort of benefits in some way. Thus, if you do too many things, it just becomes too risky. There's really no way for you to even validate the extra things that you're taking on for that. What do you think are some risky procedures that you could possibly be engaging in with your own business? Think of our harness, our neck harness. Like, what is risky in the sense that you believe that you'll be bought out by that other company? What's the name of the other company?
Haunch.
Right? Maybe it's risky in the sense of creating a product when there's already a standard one, right? With the belief that others will see the value because it's different, right? But maybe it's a risk worth taking on, right? But how do we see the fit for that? Also, we want to look at the service and product attributes. What are some of the attributes that we provide as a service, and what are some of the attributes that we have as a product? What makes our product so great? Right? What is it about your product that's so good that you'll exceed your competitors? Right? For demand. Is your product too risky? Is it too costly? Is it too foreign? Is it too exotic? Will people not get it? Right? Is your service poor? Is your service great? If it's great, how costly is that too? It may not be strategically fit for the type of business you're trying to run. Seems like you're trying to do luxury when you're just a bit basic, right? Your goal is to be basic, and it seems like you're being very luxury service oriented. Project team capability. Do your team have the skill set to pull off what you need to? Right? Do you have enough people to pull that off? Right? And your operations. Right? Are your operations just way too risky for what you are trying to achieve? So you have to think, what about, think Malin for yours, right? The dog boarding, grooming, doggy daycare, and the risk associated with that. What do you think are like the biggest risk you're taking on in terms of the operations of that? Like, what do you think that you really can't measure how it will turn out, or the success of something? Or something that you can't like pinpoint to say, I think I can measure this out, and I think it'll be successful. I can measure the risk associated with this thing.
Probably like the amount of people that like wanna come in for like dog grooming, so like since I'm doing 3 different things, obviously one's gonna be like more, like getting more clients than the other, so I think like that.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, in my operations, I really got 3 separate areas that I'm focused on. One probably stands out more than the other 2. The other 2 are a little bit more risky, but I think it'll be some sort of added value, right? But I'm not too sure how that's gonna translate into my profit, right? But you're like, hey, I'm pretty sure that if I designate a certain area where I already see there's a demand that people have a ton of dogs and they have income to travel, most likely they're gonna need a place to board the dog, right? To daycare. But I'm not sure if they're gonna still wanna come here for grooming when they could go to Petco, PetSmart, do it at home, buy their own equipment. I'm not sure if they'll need that from us. And what was the third thing you're doing? So it's like you're grooming them, you're boarding. Okay. All right, so you're like, well, the other activities, I don't know if they may be a little bit more risky, right? They may be a little bit more risky. But one, I know for certain. So maybe you think, hey, really for my business, either I learned that I'm doing too many things and we're too broad, and it doesn't necessarily translate into profit or income, or that simplify and say, we only do one thing here. And I know for certain I could calculate that risk to know how much money I would make. You're like, well, we're not so diversified, so maybe the business doesn't seem so awesome anymore or something, but it's a highly efficient business, right? We say we do one thing here, one thing is off, and we can measure off that risk, right? As opposed to say, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that too, that too, that too. Right? Something to think about. And then lastly, statistical analysis, right? Optimistic time, right? Optimistic time. How we run to see, hey, we think that we can achieve this in X amount of time. Now we say most likely time, right? So we got it 3. We said optimistic, sort of, we have X amount of time to complete this task or activity, but that's a bit optimistic, right? Maybe you don't have the data on it, so you do have to be a bit optimistic, right? Or maybe we say, well, what's the average? The most likely time. We say with the amount of resources, amount of people involved, this is most likely to occur. you can run some experiments, some tests to see how long it's gonna take to complete some sort of task. And pessimistic time, right, which is, in essence, pessimistic, we only got X amount of time to complete this is about as far as we could go. Right? Different strategies for assessing risk, because there's all risk, the risk is really you don't know, right? For a lot of things that you're doing, you're really just saying, I want to do this, but I don't necessarily have a lot of data to support how to measure what I'm doing against what others are, so it's risky. So maybe project things in three ways: optimistic, most likely, pessimistic type, right? All right, we'll end off here for today, and we'll come back to this on Friday. Does anyone else start working on their next section of business? Does anyone read it? Yeah, the Gantt chart. Anyone else start working on their Gantt charts? Okay. Let's see who can have something by Friday to talk about, but we'll continue project management then and go from there. All right, have a good day, everyone.